right, everyone, welcome to CultureCalls Dialing into the Future. This is episode 2, and we are in conversation with Arin Halicki. Arin is a best selling author, she's a visionary leader, she's a coach, she's a business strategist. She's the founder of Stellar Small Business Strategies, and she also has her own brand called Mamacita Yoga. She's the best-selling author of the book called Your Emergency Break, and her website's arinhalicki.com. Arin, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on board. How are you feeling right now? I know it's the time differences are really bad. It's 6 p.m.
Uh,
here, while it's 6 a.m. there.
I'm doing pretty well. I don't think my computer was on board with waking up this early, but I was fine. It's funny. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here and to share any wisdom, impart any wisdom that might be, helpful for those that are, either in an entrepreneurial journey, in a business journey, in a life journey, in any journey. And I just really thank you for this opportunity to be here today.
That's really awesome. I think we can just dive into a bit about your work and a bit about your life because I really find your story extremely fascinating because you go from this Silicon Valley uh, person to now you're completely shifted 360 to now you're looking into well-being and now you're coaching businesses. So how exactly did your journey start, and can you tell us a bit about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a kid who grew up like right in the hotbed of where a lot of people dream and desire to be, Silicon Valley is a really interesting place, a really interesting culture. And what I found was that through time, there were these like subtle signs and subtle feelings I had about where I was, but I just kept pushing through. I just kept pushing through and staying with certain jobs or working in different environments. And this kind of level of discomfort was there. And I'd never really had words on it until maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And in those 5 or 6 years, really started, diverting off that what I would call path, and it's this combination of understanding really what motivates and inspires me from the inside out versus what people have told me to do or what I thought I needed to do in order to be successful. And I don't know, is it? I think that, one of the things that I really appreciate about this journey is that I kind of woke up. I realized that there was this part of me that was so trapped inside that was more creative, that wanted to be more vulnerable and authentically expressed, but I felt like the construct in which I was operating in most corporate jobs didn't have room for that. And what it came to was I'd gone through several different career iterations at that point. I started like in finance. I was doing corporate overhead management for these really large government contracts. And then I had done business strategy consulting. I had done business executive leadership, kind of like account management type of work. And that was probably the breaking point for me, where I realized that the value I was bringing to the table was not fully valued. And that was the breaking point. I was just like, hey, I show up, I give you my time, I give you a lot of time. I'm living in this area that costs like, 5x compared to every other part of the country, or maybe 10x, who knows, it's crazy. And then it's like, why am I doing this? Why am I continuing to spend that money to be in this space? And that's kind of how it started. I just started really questioning, a lot of questions, a lot of curiosity, a lot of crying, back and forth from work. Like, I'm so miserable, but yet I need this money to survive here. It's like everybody has this fantasy or nightmare that they're, if they give up the job, they give up the paycheck, that it snowballs and avalanches into eventually they die homeless on the street. And in reality, the reality of it is that, yeah, these places are, quote, great to work for if you want to fit the system. If that's your desire to play nicely within the structure and that serves you, that's great. But for somebody like me who felt like there was something more, in my book, I talk about it, there's this context of doing, that we were born into doing. And the doing is what actually like doesn't allow us to connect with the being that often, because we're in this mindset of like, there's not enough, I always must do more, or I need to be this to this person or that to that manager, or even in personal relationships it comes down to, because we don't ever really consider, or we're not taught, I should say, we're not taught from a young age to consider how we feel in the environments. So that was my big breaking point. Was I was working on site at a very high profile tech company, one that everybody probably would love to work for. And I had this totally opposite experience. I was like, this is not this place for me. And I realized in that moment that I was supplying my management with all the right answers, all the right effort, like can do, roll up the sleeves, willingness, teamwork, all the things. And they were shoving it back in my face like do as I say, but not as I do type stuff. And I asked them something at one point because I thought our client was going to cancel the work that we had. And it was worth like 30 or 40% of our entire company's revenue. It was a big contract. And they were like, no, you're just being too sensitive. And it was like, okay, all right. Well, I thought I was doing the right thing to escalate when things aren't working and there's tension. And 6 months later, she basically came in and told us that she didn't want to do business with us anymore. She wanted like the contracted, basically we would have been paying them to do business with them, which is ridiculous. I mean, that's just totally nonsensical. And my management turns around and is like, how come nobody told us about this? And I was like, oh, wait a second. 6 months ago, we had this conversation. You told me I was too sensitive. Like, no, this is not the way it goes. And so I walked away. I walked away from a 6-figure job. I walked away from security. And I started into this venture of starting a online dating app concept. And the whole concept of it was about credibility and authenticity. But what I found in that journey, and that's a story for another time, is that I really wasn't good with the no structure environment. And I really also wasn't very open to receiving or giving feedback. I mean, giving feedback, I think people are pretty comfortable with, especially if they're not happy with something. But if you need to give that to another person, there's this other element that comes in, people get a little funky. And then receiving it, we may sometimes take it to heart when it really is just, it's feedback. So at the time, I wasn't really open to what was necessary in an entrepreneurial journey, which you can go to all the business schools. And certainly I did. I went to business school and I got an MBA and I had all the skills, and I was living in Silicon Valley. This is where everything happened, dreams happen. And I totally did not have that experience in the corporate or the entrepreneurial realm. And every time I had traveled down to San Diego, which, Northern California, Southern California, it's about 8-hour drive between these places. I felt this difference. Like I was like, I could see a different life for myself somewhere. And it started this seed. And so I was applying to business jobs for a really long time. And basically what I found is I'd make it into like the second or third interview cycle. And then, oh, well, we found somebody inside, or you don't have the exact skill set match. And I found that it was really competitive to get business jobs. So my startup didn't really go the way that I intended. A lot of it was because I wasn't open to that feedback and I really wasn't that passionate about it. I was just doing what people said I should do instead of what I wanted to do, which if you do have dreams of entrepreneurship, I would highly recommend that you stick to your guns, so to speak. Like you really, really stay passionate and true to what your vision is. And then if you hear enough feedback, like 5 or 6 people telling you, no, then you start to listen. But most of the time you're fighting this like uphill battle. And I wasn't aware and I wasn't really open to that at that point. So at the end of it, the big joke is everybody lives in Silicon Valley and that the entrepreneurs are all looking for their technical co-founder. That's the joke. So here you are in this hotbed of technology, tons of technology people, but nobody wants to work at a startup without receiving like $100,000 salary. And so if a founder isn't even paying themselves and they're just trying to make it, make ends meet on their own thing, and funding doesn't grow on trees like people sometimes might think, or that the back of the napkin idea really gets it. If that situation doesn't happen, it's like, well, what do you do? And I realized in that moment that I wasn't going to continue what I was doing. And I took the control and I said, well, I'll become the technical person. Like I'm smart, I'm capable, and I'm kind of a control freak at that point in my life, right? So I'm like, I'll just do it, I'll go learn. And I did like a 16-week development boot camp. It completely reinvented my career. And this is the magic. 2 weeks after I graduate, I got the job in San Diego that I'd been, looking for. Did it look anything like I expected originally? No. And so in my book, I talk about this, that like sometimes when you're striving for something, you get really attached to what it looks like or who you're going to be in that process. And every time you're going to make a change, it's just receiving new information, new feedback that you get to think like, how do I really feel in these scenarios? And is this really serving me? Like I could have at any point switched my career, but I was really attached to being in business because that's where I put all my sunk cost, all my time, all my education. I was a business person. I wasn't a tech person. And anyways, I ended up working down here for about 1.5 years before I just was like, this is it. Like, this is the final straw. And so I worked for 2 years as a consultant, and now I'm full-time entrepreneur, coaching, writing, hosting workshops, events, teaching a lot more yoga. And the yoga was interesting too. I'll just say one final thing about the transition there was that I used to think yoga was such a joke. And I mean, you're in like the hotbed of where this like whole philosophy has generated and become very popular, right? So I'm sure you even have your own opinion about it and like, what sticks and what doesn't. What I thought it was exercise. And I thought it was for all these little like, gypsy women, bohemian women and their Lululemon and, string bean women. No, no, no. I realized I was at a retreat and this woman had this beautiful like essence about her. It was just a radiance. And every time she gave people hugs, it was like you wanted to melt into her arms. She was so loving and so kind. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, what is this? Because I want that. Whatever you've got, I want it. And she's like, well, you should try Kundalini yoga. And I was like, I don't know. I'm not really a yoga person. She's like, no, I really think there might be something for you in this. And so my curiosity kind of got the best of me. I went and I tried a class. And to be honest, I actually fell in love with the aspect of sound first. And then the yoga, I started to realize that certain things were going away, like my road rage, like my tension and ability to like interact with people. All of a sudden, like I wasn't as triggerable. And I realized that my nervous system somehow with this technology of yoga was being impacted, in a positive way. And then I became more open to like exploring what that could mean and how I'm showing up. And as it turns out, if you do want to be an entrepreneur, I'll make another, public service announcement. It's really, really, really important. I write about it in the book that you do have a connection to something bigger than yourself, a technology, a practice, the great unknown, God, spirit, universe, whatever you want to call it. You need a connection there. And this for me has been a huge connection to tune into my heart, like how I feel, not like, oh, mushy, it's like, I actually understand more about my responses to how I'm showing up by practicing yoga. And the yoga of Kundalini is more about awareness and less about like, I'm going to hold, warrior two for 5 minutes and chant Om at the end. It's more for me than that. And so it totally shifted my perspective. And I think that that's really important because in the business world, I've noticed there's a lot of finite things, right? Things that like people want the science or they want the backup data, they want the data, and they want like you to just be playing within the lines. And this is my big mission is like, I really feel like this level of like awareness, consciousness, and what we're producing, there's a coexistence that hasn't been really fully defined in that space so that when people are working, we're not just like drones. It's not like we entered into the Star Wars episode and we've got like the army of clones that we're making, although sometimes it feels like it. I do feel like there's a wave of people pushing in thinking like, hey, what does it actually mean to be a human being working in an environment? And things like a yoga, a daily practice of devotion to oneself or the great beyond. It could be, going to church for some people. It could be, meditation. Transcendental meditation was a big movement for a long time. Anything like that's going to get you out of here, out of this headspace and into your body, super important. It could be dance. Dancing is great too, because I don't know if you've ever tried to do this, but if you try and think and dance at the same time, it doesn't work. Just so you know. It looks really funky. It's good people watching stuff, but I feel like for me, this whole journey has just been about awakening to new possibilities. And so, I'm willing to speak authentically about it because I was right where everybody wanted to be, and it totally was not where I needed to be. There's a difference of what you want and sometimes what really will fulfill you, what inspires you, what keeps you going. And not a lot of people choose to go that path of honoring that authentic truth within themselves. And it's more than just a spiritual concept. It's actually can cause you to get sick. It can cause you to really disconnect or have poisonous relationships in your life, whether that's professional or personal. For a long time, I was really lonely. Like I didn't have a lot of people I felt like got me, right? It's like I'm on this path. But I realized I was creating a lot of like specialness or things that I needed to be the best at, or that you couldn't possibly understand me. And so it's like walls. And at some point, as human beings, we need connective stuff, whether it's in the working environment or the home. Without that, we're going to feel like totally the pressure of all those walls at some point. And so, my book is really just the context in which we're living, which is doing, we're valued on what we produce. and then taking this journey of like the things that you have that are available to you, your body, your nervous system, all the relationships that you create with others, with fear, what it means to have spirituality in your life, because it's really just being in the spirit of something, like feeling something and being excited and trusting, because a lot of the faith that people talk about is organized and structured, but I really feel like the faith in the unknown is really a trusting of yourself in that space of like, I don't know where I'm going as an entrepreneur, but I know that I've got willpower and I've got openness to feedback, and I am creating an impact in the world that's important, and that can be enough. But if you're not willing to kind of go under the hood a bit into that feeling or into that cutting edge of like the unknown and how you operate within it, because some people, that's a shutdown point. It's like, I'm not going there. I don't know enough about that, so I'm stopping. It's a hard stop.
Right.
Entrepreneurs for the most part are pushing past that because you really are a trailblazer. You're not going into a space that most people know about. And so, people aren't willing to go there. I wouldn't recommend entrepreneurship for them. I'd recommend a little self-development before they go there, right?
I truly do love that, and I think me, especially being Indian, I can vouch for the Kundalini yoga path that you did speak for. Um, but I do love the fact that you spoke about how entrepreneurship isn't for everyone, and sometimes it truly can be a lonely path. Not everyone can understand what's on your mind, and it's not necessary that they do understand as well, because your perspectives are different than what you would like to know, your employees to know, or what you would like your peers to know as well. So I think we could just doubling down on that as well. What do you think is the one thing that entrepreneurs who are coming up now, who want to become entrepreneurs from now onwards, what do you think is the one thing that they really should look forward to from what I've learned from your journey? You speak a lot about balancing wellness and balancing the corporate life as well. So, what do you think is the one thing that entrepreneurs now coming up should look up to?
I really feel very passionately that they need to have a strong sense of who they are as an individual and not be intertwined with the business as their identity. Because when you are intertwined with the business as your identity, that is attaching yourself to an outcome, to a result, and not if your innate worthiness gets blocked by something that isn't really defined yet. And so you're actually consciously at that point choosing to value something outside yourself more than yourself. So, I'm not encouraging people to be arrogant, because certainly there is a certain amount of that within the entrepreneurial world as well. I mean, I can't even tell you how many stories of interactions with different people. My favorite, though, was the one where somebody had a magazine open and they were just like, well, it looks like they're doing this and making money. I get to do that.
Wow.
I'm like, wow, I mean, why? Why are you doing this? What's so important about that specific thing? Entrepreneurship isn't just casual.
Right.
It's not casual. And it's not as easy as walking into an office and asking for money and getting it. It is a lot of no's before yeses. It's a lot of putting yourself out there and asking a lot of questions, like being curious. And so if you're not really good with the relationship you have with yourself, who you are, how you respond to feedback, that journey is a lot tougher. So my recommendation to any entrepreneur that wants, or anybody that wants to seek entrepreneurship, and I would consider myself a serial entrepreneur at this point. I'm not satisfied with the status quo, and I get to keep pushing the envelope. But I realize in that journey that without a sense of what really lights me up, what inspires me, I'll head in directions that really don't sustain me in the long run, that ultimately will either burn me out or disconnect me from important support networks and communities, whether that's my friends and family or potentially investors. People don't want to work with a robot. They actually do, at least from my experience, most venture capitalists do want to work with a human being. But in the same vein, like, you don't need venture capital to be an entrepreneur. Sometimes entrepreneurship is not seeking unicorn status like an Uber or a Lyft or Amazon. It could be you actually just want to make movement with a needle, right? Like you're just moving the needle on something that's important to you. So it's like you get to evaluate as well, what does success mean to you? How will you know that you've arrived? And that's why I really feel firmly on the self. Like, you need to know what that feels like for you, because if you don't, you will constantly be striving in and not really understanding any of those benchmarks along the way. It's like you're driving down the road. I talk about this in the book. You're driving down the road and you're seeing the signs off the side of the road that could give you the important information you need. But if you're unwilling to, like, the sign says dead end ahead and you keep going at like 60 miles an hour, or, however many kilometers an hour that equates to 100, whatever, you're gonna really do some damage at some point. Yes, you could fly at that speed onto the unknown path, but you may be causing more destruction and or missing of those signs. And so that's why it's important to really understand and come back to who you are in that. Are you really patient? Are you really open to feedback? Do you know what inspires you? How's the health of the relationships you have professionally and personally? And if there's a gap, and by the way, the clue here is there's always a gap. If you're unwilling to realize that it's cyclical and you keep going and going and going and need to reinvest, then it's like, don't be an entrepreneur, because that's so the journey. It's not like you reach the top of the mountain and it's over. I wish I could say that. And that's definitely not been my experience or the experience of any other entrepreneurs that I've met who are very successful. It's a commitment. It's a commitment to yourself. It's a commitment to something outside yourself. And it's a commitment to that relationship with the unknown. Because if that's unhealthy, then for sure it will not be a pleasant ride, for sure.
Right. I truly agree to that. Also, doubling down on that itself. So you speak a lot about of what you exactly said now, is that entrepreneurs need to have certain skills, and and in my opinion, they really need to have people skills. They need to know
Yes.
how to network, how to communicate. And I also believe that if you're an entrepreneur and you want to hire certain people to build a certain company, it's necessary that you have good people skills. And the way that you as an entrepreneur do act, I think that is going to reflect upon how your people are going to reflect to you as well. So how do you think the organizational culture is influenced by leadership as an entrepreneur, or even the leadership body of certain companies? How do you think that is affected by the entrepreneur?
Yeah, I really feel like it doesn't matter if it's entrepreneurship or a big corporation, because who does it all start with at the end of the day?
Right.
I mean, this is like a trick question, right?
Yeah.
Because it all starts with us. Like
Yeah.
our filter of experience. We could think management's really terrible and things are happening to us, or we can choose to be empowered and have a different relationship with those results we're generating. Like maybe it isn't working for us and we need to step away, but we'd much rather blame other things outside of us than actually be responsible for creating our reality and what's working for us. And it's not easy. So what you just said is super important about building relationships. I don't believe that I would have had any of the jobs I had without being willing to go into what that relationship looked like and be flexible. I can't give somebody, and this is the biggest mistake I see out there in self-help and coaching and entrepreneurship, even in the business world and HR departments. I'm going to give you a 5-step process to deal with a person.
Right.
Wait a second. Like, think about how multidimensional human beings are. We really need to be, like you said, outfitted and indoctrinated with a way of relating with one another in an honest and authentic way. Because without that, there will not be a trust, there will not be a safety. People won't actually honestly communicate with you if you don't honestly communicate with them. So, as a visionary leader, I found that the most influential thing you can be is authentic. And then following that is open, open to connection, open to feedback, open to the unknown. And as you're going, really invoking, I know these all sound like spiritual concepts, but I think they're human concepts. Gratitude for where you are and what you have access to, because sometimes we'll get stuck in like, well, I need more of this in order to do or get that. And sometimes it's a conversation of inspiration with somebody, like somebody may not be producing the results that you intended. Well, there's this thing called conscious intention, and then there's this thing called unconscious intention. And unconscious intention is like the big black hole sometimes. But if you really listen and you're invested in the people, if you ask them and you kind of set the stage with like, listen, we are here and we're working on this thing, and it's really, it's really important and it's impactful. I'd love to know how you're feeling about this and like what's been coming up for you. And please know that I'm open to feedback, and I am not going to use this against you, that we are in a conversation right now, authentically expressing, what's been coming up for you. People really don't feel safe to express themselves in organizations. So the more trust and the more solid base you have of an authentic leadership style, somebody that is open to understanding as opposed to telling somebody how to do something, open to inviting somebody rather than forcing them, open to asking somebody a question instead of just presuming and telling somebody an answer. It's not a 5-step process. It's really messy. And if you're unwilling to be messy and you're looking for a process, those organizations and those relationships will be more superficial. It's just the byproduct of it. So the more you're willing to go into that space of like kind of the unknown and ask, you will receive the answers. And that second part is listening and processing your feedback. And if you're a really uptight individual, and I hate to say it that way, but like if you're really triggerable and you're snappy and you're on edge, that's gonna relate to how your employees or your organization experiences you. So if you want it to be different, it starts right here, because this is the only thing at the end of the day we can control. I think it's a nice dream to think that we can like control other people, but what we're really doing is inviting them to be aligned with what we see as possible. And if it's not possible, be open to what they have to say to us in return. And if that doesn't work in the long term of like, maybe something's happening in their family life or something's happening with their skill set that they're just not, up to par, whatever that is, be open to the conversation, not just leave them high and dry. You can obviously, it doesn't need to be like a this or a that, the black and white thinking. It could be a little bit of both. It could be a transition. It could be like, hey, listen, I know this isn't probably going to work in the long run. I'm not going to leave you hanging. Maybe I'll give you extra severance. Maybe I will give you time. And, I think people really think that if they don't, it could go two ways. I'll speak to it in positive. People think if they are honest and authentic, that there is a punishment for that. Think about that for a minute. It's pretty awful. Like honesty and integrity are punishable offenses. That is ridiculous. And honestly, that's what it takes in an organization to build what you're talking about, the strong relationships, the higher productivity outcomes. All those things are based on trust, integrity, responsibility, commitment. And to me, it's like, I know this sounds strange, but love. And it's not so much love, but it's in the terms of like mushy, smushy love, it's respect and a willingness to believe in your own worthiness. It's like self-love. Because if you're not showing up powerfully, you will either be steamrolled by your organization or your organization will steamroll you. So it's like having that strong sense of self and being, the source of whatever you're creating in your experience is very powerful. So whatever relationships you think are or aren't working, it starts with the question of like, how am I showing up? Have I really been open to feedback? Have I really tried to make the outcome different? What does it look like to have a radically honest conversation with my management? My friend, he's a genius and he's amazing. He talks about them as speak straight conversations. So can I, there's something that's been coming up. I just want to know if we can have a conversation very honestly and just, see how things are, check in. And it doesn't need to be like a therapy session. Some people are also afraid of that too. Like they're going to be preached at. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know. I think that does make a lot of sense. And I really love the fact that you spoke about how certain people in higher leadership positions need to make certain changes to make sure that the same is reflected upon their employees as well, and upon among the circle that they're interacting with. And I really love the fact that you told that love is one of the most important things that needs to be taken care of here as well. And it's not just the mushy love that we speak about. It's more, in fact, the love that we show towards our circles, the love that we show towards our employees. And I really love the fact that you said that. How do you think companies in large scales, how do you think they can cultivate and build this exact culture and build such people that you spoke about right now? Because I understand how it's easier in a way. Building a good culture is easier in a smaller company, but building it in a scale of companies like 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 employees, how do you think people in such big positions can do something to make a drastic change in the biggest spectrum?
So here's the beauty of the answer to that question: is there's no special magic pill. But what I've learned in my own experience, what I've observed, and also what I've studied, is that the tone at the top matters no matter what the size of the organization is and what the level of the top is. The top could be a director, the top could be the VP, the top could be the CEO, it could be any level. But whatever the tone is there is dictating what's happening underneath, no matter the size of the organization. And whoever's at those levels of influence, if they're unwilling to take a risk or be bold and outrageous, that's going to kind of accelerate or hinder whatever progress needs to be made towards the cultural evolution. I wouldn't call it a revolution, but like an evolution. And it doesn't mean throwing out like what they call the baby with the bathwater. It's like you've got this tub of water and you've got stuff, and it's like all of a sudden the big shift comes. Do you really want everything to go out the door? Not always, not always. And so the idea of the size of the organization, I'd say that doesn't really matter, because everybody's top, so to speak, has a level of influence on the ultimate outcome. Now, I will say it is a little bit more difficult, just a little bit more difficult to move the momentum of an organization with thousands of people in it, because that is that much more buy-in and enrollment into a new vision of how things could be. So the focus, I'd say, at that point would be at getting the leaders, like real leaders. And that's the other thing, is it really annoys me. People think that leadership is a management position with the title.
Right.
But leadership is actually being shot at by people, like sometimes literally, but the idea of like, you will be judged. People will say not nice things to you. People will not believe in you, but you need to believe anyways. And it's believing in something more than yourself. So at any of those levels, if people want to institute a new culture of, let's say, more authenticity, more communication, maybe they want more ultimately productivity, it all starts with the conversation of like, how are those leaders effectively or not effectively engaging with people? What does that look like? Like, what do we ultimately want? And kind of backwards engineer some things that could be possible to evoke that. But they will be much softer skilled things than just a daily stand-up. It could be a lot of one-on-ones. It could be, something that worked really well in an organization I was part of were skip level meetings. You skipped whatever level of management that you were directly reporting to, went to the higher one and had a conversation. It may even be better sometimes to go and skip a level down too as a leader and see, right? Because
Right.
You're going to find out much more about what is and isn't working in the organization than if you just stay where you're at and kind of like, marionette string and guess that you think this lever needs to move. It's like, just go ask. So it doesn't really matter the size of the organization, but if there's a commitment at whatever stage of the journey that they're at, and it's kind of a myth that you'd think that it'd be easier to start a culture from the beginning, but culture is a ever evolving, ever changing thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even within what some would consider solid cultures, there's still some level of murmur and noise. So we get to be open and think about things as never being finite, and always in the realm of what I call possibility. So if you're thinking that something's possible, that's really inspiring sometimes. So it's not just about saying it, but being responsible for how do you get there. And I would say that that's secondary to the excitement that you inspire in somebody in a possibility, because it's an emotional process. How do people buy things? They buy on emotions. So how do you enroll somebody in something like a vision of how something could be? You need to go into the emotional field. And if you're not willing to go there, you will not see the results that you desire in the long term. You may see them in the short term because you're forcing it. I call that like controlment, like I'm gonna control the outcome, but you can't.
Yeah.
You can only inspire and align. It's just like stakeholder management. You can inspire and align. People are still going to have their individual opinions, and so it's like ushering and championing and moving, and probably a lot slower than you would imagine, because cultural change in any context takes, unfortunately or fortunately, years. It's not and it's done. And we look at things that are happening in this world right now. I think the evidence speaks for itself that cultural change does not happen in the blink of an eye. It's a commitment, and it's a devotion to something bigger and something more inspiring than whatever's going on in that moment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, right. I truly agree to that. And also the fact that said that culture is ever changing. It's not something that you just do today and that's done by tomorrow. That's something you just need to constantly keep looking at as well. And just picking up on that trend itself, do you think, and you do have a fair amount of knowledge in the world of technology, so do you think technology can play any better part in aligning culture? Do you think technology influences the way culture is, and do you think leaders can do certain things to make sure that technology is put in place to make sure that culture can be measured or anything of that sort?
Hmm. That's a tricky one for me, and I'll probably go a little bit against the grain on it. That I think data and analytics are great for hard measured things, but when you start going
Mhm.
into the realm of the soft skills and the emotions and things, unless it's a more subjective and
Mhm.
AI based type of thing, it probably won't capture. And even at that, you're still going to need some level of humanity looking at whatever the evidence is, because
Right.
there's a lot more dynamics going on. Plus, I think that we can all relate in this world of what's been going on health wise and different access that people do and don't have to each other.
Mhm.
That has had a tremendous impact on how we feel. So, at some level, we still need that connection at a human level. Biologically, physiologically speaking, it is very healthy to be in relationship with people and not just data. So it's like it's not the popular answer, but
Mhm.
is as a money making technique. I think it's much more important to invest in things that are more hard and fast in that realm for data than the soft stuff, because the soft stuff ends up being projects that could really take a lot of time, money, and effort and not yield tremendous impact as much as a real human to human interaction.
Right, right.
That's been my experience with it. But technology obviously is very valuable in the right context. I don't believe that in this context of culture that it's super valuable. I think the way that people sell it, they could probably make it sound really exciting, but at
Right.
the end of the day, I don't believe humans were built to interact with analytics and data as a measure of their humanity. It doesn't equate for me.
Right, right. I truly do love that. Could you tell us a bit about your book? I mean, I was
Yeah,
truly
yeah,
fascinated by the name itself.
yes,
If you could tell me and our viewers as well. So, your book name is called Your Emergency Brake. What was the inspiration behind the name, and what's
yeah.
in it in the book?
So originally, instead of saying brake like the thing that you break in the car,
Mhm.
I originally was thinking like I took a break from my pattern. I took a
Right.
really big break from my life pattern, my professional pattern. And then I thought it's a play on words, but it also is a powerful visual that you could be going with momentum in a certain direction, and you always have the ability to brake, to pull a brake, to engage a brake if you need it. Most people don't think they even have that ability. And so I wanted to impart this knowledge that over all these iterations of my career, over all the iterations of the different environments that I've been through, I literally feel like the Rosetta Stone, the stone that they found in Greece or wherever. It has all the different languages translated across the environments. I'm like, I've been through so many things that there's definitely something in here I could like impart to somebody as far as wisdom goes. If you want to make a change in your life and you don't want to keep making changes like always every 2 months you're changing something, or even every 2 years, then you get real honest about what it entails to make sustaining change. And it's all about understanding, the context in which we live in, which is scarcity. There's not enough, and I'm only valued on what I produce. And if I don't produce enough, then I'm less than. So it's a worthiness, it's a self-love, it's a faith conversation of the unknown. If I don't want to do that, then I'm okay, and that was my big message. I had a big, like, very unexpected, like, spiritual awakening that the message was very clear. I did not see a person. I talk about this in the book. I did not see a person, but I had this overwhelming feeling of it's going to be okay. And that's really helped me understand, and everybody gets to come to their own version of this, but trusting in themselves in the unknown. So it's like, if you have a nervous system, how do you regulate it? If you are attached to outcomes, what is that really entailing to break away from that? What does that look like? And so it's a journey of like all the things you would need to make a change and pull the brake. And it even recommends, like, if you don't have a certain sense of things, don't pull it yet. Go and do a little bit of that softer skill or personal development stuff before you decide. And don't decide on anger. Don't decide on fear. Decide on in an empowered and in an inspired way. And so it ends with this, kind of process of what it's like to pull it, some things that might happen, when you decide to make a change in your life and how to manage through. But then also at the end, like, hey, guess what? You're actually like the rebel leader of your life now, because most people are going to be swimming like this way and like, oh yeah, it's fine. This is just the way it is. And all of a sudden you're like, wait, no, I can like go this way and this is possible. And it's like realizing that if you're going to cross over into that space of taking control back in your life and how you show up, who you are, that you have an opportunity to influence and to inspire people. And it's a beautiful journey if you choose to take it. But this is for both personal and professional decisions. I wrote it kind of broadly in that way. I imagine that there are a few more books in me. I know at least two, and one of them will be more the kind of the love and the spirituality side, and the other side may be more of the nervous system side. Because for me, I've had a lot of challenges. I have a very sensitive nervous response to things, and it's my conditioning. It's how I was raised. It's some of the innate things that I was born with, and we all have our version of that. And it's like, I like to say that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and really meaning that, like, if we don't understand how to deal with our own physiology and our humanness, we're not gonna really have the full spectrum life and potential that we could have. So it's like, if you do want to wake up, you want to open your eyes, you want to head in a direction that may not be the mainstream, this book is really going to help the foundation of what you need to get there and not be making constant change. Because really it is about your authentic self, openness to feedback, relationship with the unknown, relationship with your physiology, and then the willingness to redefine some of the relationships that you have with external things as well. Because if you have people in your life, this is the other thing, you may have some people in your life that do or don't support what you're up to, and you get to be really honest about, like, maybe they're not a part of my life for the next 6 months, or maybe this organization that doesn't suit me, I need to kind of like treat it as a means to an end. I'm not for people doing the, like, abrupt switch on things. If you have the ability to create a ramp for yourself in whatever change you're making, please do that. But the book is really just the bumper rails, and then you get to choose your own adventure and come back and see if some of the advice sounds different the next time around.
Mhm. Right. I truly love that. And I highly recommend all of our viewers to go ahead and check out the book. The book name is called Your Emergency Brake. Thank you so much, Arin, for joining us. Is there anything you'd like to let our viewers know? Is there anything that you'd like to pitch? You have a minute. You can tell whatever you want.
Yeah, no, I am going to be starting up a little bit of a book club around the book, where I'm going to release audio chapters, and then we're going to have some discussions and worksheets around that. And so if you go to youremergencybrake.com, there will be a place where you can sign up for updates that I'm giving in my normal business advice and strategy ways, and then also things related to the book. So there will be a download that you can go get, the 3 top mistakes that people make when they're making a change in their life, and then just kind of stay in touch. If you ever want to just reach out, like, I'm happy to answer emails and engage with people. It's my joy. And you can find me on Instagram. My name is my handle, Arin Halicki. So yeah, really appreciate this opportunity. This is great conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Arin.